Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Marks, and I'd like to welcome you to another in a series of noon happenings sponsored by the Associated Student Speakers Program. Today's program is really a historical first. It's the first time that this type of a setup, this type of what we hope will be a give and take, has happened on any UC campus. But to introduce the program and to moderate it, we have Chancellor Young, and at this time I'd like to turn it over to him.
The format will be very simple. First of all, I would like to introduce the regents who are here. On my right, the extreme right here, speaking geographically only at the moment, Mr. Fred Dutton. Next to him, Mr. Roger Pettit. And at the other end of the table, Mr. Bill Forbes. There will be no statements made by any members of the panel. The purpose of the discussion here is to answer questions. There are, I understand, 4 people in the audience with microphones located across the ballroom, and I will call upon them in order, starting to the west. So we'll start in with the first question. Starting to the west. If you'll raise your hand, he'll find you.
Chancellor, we read in the Daily Bruin of the action of the Academic Senate regarding a motion to abolish ROTC and another to withdraw credit for the courses. Now, I do not believe that the Senate has the authority to abolish ROTC per se from the university, and that the Senate Constitution allows for units on campus. I suppose a strict interpretation of the Morrill Act could allow that one unit on campus would satisfy the intent of the Act, but not the desires of some students. Likewise, the annual contract signed by the various military departments and the university calls for appropriate credit for courses. I believe, however, it is in the purview of the Senate, through its existing mechanisms, to review these courses to determine appropriate credit. Recently, for example, the Navy has completed a complete revision and upgrading of its curriculum, stressing theory, fundamentals, principles, and relationships. And this is also true for the Army and Air Force ROTCs. Now, what we ask is the feeling of the chancellors and the regents present concerning the effect of an academic Senate resolution towards abolishing and towards removal of credit. And we would appreciate the regents' views on these matters. And in addition, what actions would you recommend from us as students to take to ensure the retention of ROTC programs which give us the opportunity to serve our country as officers? Now, abolishment and withdrawal of credit.
Let's
both the abolishment
try to keep it quiet during the questions.
And the withdrawal of credit would both have the effect of denying us this choice. And for many of us, these programs are also scholarship programs, without which many of us here would not have the prime opportunity for an education here at UCLA. What, for example, would be the effect of the regents of a student petition supporting the following position paper? And this paper is as follows. We believe that the open exchange of views on issues vital to the community is not only desirable, but absolutely necessary to the continued existence of UCLA's tradition of academic excellence. So in general, we recognize the issue of the ROTC programs at UCLA is both complex and controversial. We believe that this issue has been clouded by an abundance of emotion and also a shortage of reason. And in the interest of an objective solution to this difficult problem, therefore, we submit the following evaluation of the ROTC programs at UCLA.
I think that's enough for us to be able to. I think you've given enough of the position paper for us to be able to answer the question, and I would hope that in the future we could keep the questions a little shorter. I would, although I hope this isn't the case for the rest of the program, I believe I really have to respond to a part of it because obviously something has happened which the regents who are here are not aware of and would not be able to respond to, and then I'll turn it to them to respond to the policy questions. The action which was taken by the Academic Senate on this matter was merely to refer, I shouldn't say merely, was to refer the question in the form of a sense motion, the feeling of the faculty on this as to several types of action which might be taken regarding ROTC on this campus to a mail ballot to serve as information to the faculty of the College of Letters and Science in their review and analysis of the future of those programs. So no action was taken, none is contemplated other than determining what faculty opinion is on this particular matter. Now, if any of the regents want to speak to the more general questions or what their views are about the matter at large or student participation in it, I refer to them.
No.
Mr. Dutton.
Well, I think whether or not credit is given for a particular course, including ROTC, should be up to the Academic Senate. The university has certain obligations under the Morrill Act. It is entirely possible to make available military training without having it get academic credit. I think when the regents began to try to determine what curriculum should be, what meet requirements, standards of the academicians, they're moving into an area which they have already ventured into much too far and lack the professional... and lack the professional competence to know what to do about it. Secondly, let me say, however, that there's a reference to the need for scholarships. Some people in ROTC depend on that as a source of money. One of the things that disturbs me very greatly is the increasing extent, excuse me, to which the federal government is getting control over academic environments through whether or not they hold or withhold funds. Let me just make one last point. I would hope that the Academic Senate would still provide a diversity of courses. I think in the student environment now, there is a recognition of fundamental faults in the larger society. I happen to agree that one of those is too much military influence in American society. But at the same time, I don't believe that considerations like that, coming from you or from members of the Board of Regents, should be having an effect on what the curriculum is. I think students should have a choice of a wide variety of courses, and if the Academic Senate finds that ROTC is upgraded, as made more difficult in terms of the substance of the courses, meets the normal requirements, then I would certainly support the Senate and its conclusions.
Mr. Pettit, you wanted to remark, I believe.
Well, I would take perhaps just for the sake of the discussion and very briefly a somewhat different view, first qualifying what I say by advising you that I have never had any formal relationship with an ROTC program. As Regent Dutton has stated, I think it is very clear to all of us that whatever program the university has, it must have academic integrity. I don't think the Regents have taken a view contrary to that. A view has been expressed that the maintenance of ROTC programs is important in preserving a civilian concept or philosophy within the military. I think there is some merit to that contention. And I think there's some merit also to the contention that we are concerned about and will continue to be concerned about our national security as we have in the past, perhaps in a little different way. And we are concerned also that our institutions, even our universities, are a part of our society.
The next question from this section here, please.
Okay, considering that education is the main means by which the poor advance themselves, and that persons who are taking over buildings and disrupting classes across the nation are destroying public support for education, do you think that these persons are helping or hurting the poor?
Bill, I'll give you the first
Well,
option. Regent Forbes will respond first, at least, to that.
since September 1964, as all of us know, the University of California has been somewhat off balance because of unusual disturbance. I do not relate this essentially to students, because I know that it is a much broader subject than that. We are, all of us in the university family are a part of society. There is great ferment going on. There is much that needs to be done, and many of us are trying to help in doing something. The ones who are obnoxious, the ones who are somewhat disruptive and thoughtless should, in my view, realize that all the public has supported higher education in our state for 100 years. All the citizens have contributed to this. They make their votes known. If we want to develop good programs and changes, in my view, it must be done in an orderly, thoughtful, intelligent manner.
Anyone else want to comment to that question? Mr. Dutton.
Yeah, I would. I think the premise of the question is fundamentally wrong. The University of California has damn few poor people in it. Less than 3% of the total enrollment of the university, as I said at the Regents meeting last month, is black or brown. And yet those two groups make up almost 25% of the population of this state. When the governor, for example, says that we should have tuition, he's not talking about a tuition just in students. He's talking about a middle-class tax, and he should recognize it. Certainly, I don't think people should be sitting in buildings and obstructing, but certainly also I think the grievances they have need to be responded to, need to be met through dialogue a lot earlier than they have been thus far.
This section here, please.
Lieutenant Governor Reineke, one of the regents, made a proposal to include students on the Board of Regents. Well, this seems at appearance to be a highly beneficial proposal. However, a question does arise. How would these students be selected? Because if they were to be selected by the regents or by some other organization other than the students that would serve on the board might not represent the students as a whole and could be used to justify any actions against the students by the Regents saying, well, the students have our support, when in effect this student would be nothing more than a rubber stamp. So this proposal seems to be very good if the student would be a full member and selected in some sort of representative way by the student bodies of the schools.
Roger, do you?
Yeah.
Mr. Pettit will.
I think the question of student representation cannot really be considered separately from the question, for example, of possible faculty representation on the board, nor do I think it can or should be considered separately from the whole question of governance of the university, or perhaps governance of our public higher education systems in the state of California. The selection problem is a very real problem. The question that comes to my mind is not only the question of selection, but the question of changing attitudes. We need change, as was discussed a moment ago. Our institution must change to adapt to the present needs and must recognize the fact that 50% of our population is under 25, that we have such a tremendous representation in the form of students, that students are entitled to be heard in a proper and responsible way. Whether or not that includes representation on the existing governing boards, I think cannot be answered until we take a look at the changes that are necessary to adapt the basic structure of the institution to the problems today first. And I think that this is simply one aspect of it.
The next question from the far section.
Yeah, I might point out in passing that the regents aren't selected, but they're appointed, as it is right now. They're appointed by the board, by the governor of the state. They're not selected. There's no selective process by the people, or the students, or the faculty, or anyone. But my question is, how can you justify the University of California as an educational institution operating two weapons research and development laboratories, mainly Livermore and Los Alamos?
Who would like to answer that question?
Well, I'll comment on this, Ms. Chancellor. And I realize that this may not be a particularly popular stance, but having visited Los Alamos and been briefed on what the laboratory is doing, 70% now in peacetime activity, and Livermore, I would say that the justification should be that the university system is a part of the fabric of our society, that the development of weaponry is something that has been deemed essential by our country through all its history, and whether I may like it or not, on a personal basis, the budget for war is considerable and is paid for by all the tax-paying members of our society. And I believe that the justification, therefore, is that the university is contributing to an activity in which it has ability and has made many substantial contributions.
Anyone else? Do either of you want to make a comment? Fred? Roger?
Go ahead. All right. Very quickly,
Bring the
Mr.
mic a little
Chancellor.
closer.
I think, again, we come back to the question of what is the university? It's an institution of our society. Historically, our society has required to be able to defend itself. Now, if we can achieve a position where we don't have to worry about national defense anymore, then we won't have to worry about preservation of our institutions, and we can't have it both ways. And our institutions cannot survive unless they have broad community support. I think it's essentially a pragmatic question, but I think, again, going to the question of student representation on the board, faculty representation on the board, the whole question of adaptation of our institutions today to meet today's conditions, if indeed they are quite different from yesterday's, then it should be re-examined in terms of the role of the university in our society, and not simply dismissed out of hand.
Fred, do you have anything to say?
Well, contrary to some of you, or what appears to be the assumption of some of you, I certainly think that we need a national security establishment. I think that that can be said, however, without that intruding into the educational environment, which is the situation with these particular laboratories. I, for one, believe that both our society and probably the overall budget of the university, including federal as well as state funds, is shifted towards the military. That doesn't mean that there's not need for some effort, some attention in this area, but the only explanation, the only justification as far as I'm concerned is historical. The country needed it 25 years ago. The University of California had the individuals, people like Oppenheimer. We moved into it. I think it's long past time that we, like MIT and many other large and distinguished universities in the country, take a careful and thorough re-examination of this particular question. I think it's a legitimate question.
The far... Yes.
I'd like to address this question to the Regents. We've been talking about the university, society, and so on, and I think we're not dealing with a real myth in our society. For instance, what are the Regents? People in here don't know what the Regents are. I think it's necessary that the Regents are demystified, and by this I mean simply that instead of people coming cap in hand with a list of grievances to the Regents, they recognize that the Regents are a representative of a class of people, and they say, well, now what are the Regents? And I think I wish the Regents would respond to this. I mean, it seems to me that the Regents are a class of people, or represent a class of people which wrest super profits from South Africa, which control Latin America, and which control the productive and psychic energy of this society. Now, when is it... How long, Mr. Regents, do you think that you will be able to maintain this mystification of your role? How long before people come and say, no more cap in hand, Regents, no more?
Who wants to start on that one? Roger?
I'll take it.
All right, go ahead.
Well, I really, because I am a kind of a one-timer on the board, and because I think being a one-timer as an ex officio regent by virtue of being president of the Alumni Association, I think that the appointed regents should direct their attention to that question. But I'd be happy to make this observation. Now, and I'm, by making that preliminary statement, I'm not copping out, as you would say. The suggestion is that I am part of something that is doing a whole variety of things that are disreputable and despicable and should not be done. Now, it may well be that I would agree with at least a considerable part of what the gentleman has said should not be done. But the question, I think, condemns the Regents individually and collectively, again, out of hand. There's certainly nothing mystical about me, I can assure you. I'm a poor farm boy who doesn't even have the credentials to get on your list.
Any comment from...
I like the Chancellor. I have my roots in Riverside.
Any comment from any of the other regents?
Yeah, I'd like to answer seriously. Historic. There are exceptions on the board, and knowing Roger as well as I do, I can tell you that he and I are exceptions. But basically, the Regents were picked for 98 of the 100 years of the university, I believe, for several purposes. Primarily to act as a buffer against political pressures and social changes, contrary to let me finish, and against from the outside environment, and two, to get resources for the university's budget. The academic senate in the curriculum and the administration, the president and the chancellors were supposed to run the rest of it. What we have, I believe, within the last several years is a change of that particular function for the board. We are now moving much more deeply into the governance of the establishment. This is where I think we're getting the frictions, the troubles, the difficulties. But if the Regents are supposed to be buffers, if they are supposed to get resources, you are going to get people of very considerable wealth and position and all the rest of it on this board. As long as the board is changing, has changed, and I think as far as we can foresee in the future, will have a different role than just as a buffer against the outside, then I think the question of who should be on the board, what should be the appointment or the selection process, who should pass on it, what representation from different elements in the general society are legitimate questions and should be brought up. What the board has been in the past, I think, is going to have to be looked at differently from what it should be in the future.
Bill, do you want to say anything? Question from this section. Yes.
You say the board is to serve as a buffer. How can it possibly serve as a buffer when it's made up of members of a corporate elite? Now, the other two gentlemen have made the point very clearly. I think it's significant that the university is deeply involved in the state apparatus and the federal budget. Now, isn't it true that the membership of the Regent in general represents a corporate elite which is profiting from the federal budget? In other words, you're members of the boards of directors of the companies which sell to the federal government, and you're actually profiting off war and profiting off the university's involvement in war.
Regent Forbes.
Yes. Now, you have made a statement there, and I should just like to respond concerning myself. I am not on the board of directors of any corporation other than my own tiny family music company in Los Angeles. Now, is there a question you'd like to ask that will...
I realize that
Yes.
the members of this panel have been very carefully selected so as not to give adequate representation.
If I can, I need to make a comment right there, because the members of the panel were not carefully selected. The The students who are responsible for this program wrote to every member of the board and invited them to attend, and these are the ones who came. So if there is self-selection, it has been self-selection on the part of the Regents and not on the part of the apparatus put this program on.
In any event, that's why I purposely phrased the question as the Regents in general, and I would much prefer that you respond specifically to the Regents' contacts with industry in general and not with your own personal history.
Do that? Do either of you want to?
Let me simply make it clear that I am not in a position to disclose to you what the personal business involvement of each regent is.
Fred, do you?
No.
I think the comment that Mr. Dutton made a while ago was in a way at least responsive to this from his point of view, that the kind of organization, the kind of selection process which has been used in the past is probably should be questioned at the present time given the changes that have occurred. The next question from this area, I believe we're in now.
Mr. Regent Forbes made a comment earlier about he was going to make an unpopular, take an unpopular stand, and he had the freedom to do that. I should like to ask the Regents whether or not members of the faculty of the University of California are now in any danger if they take unpopular political stands and do so perhaps even in the classroom.
Mr. Chancellor, I would like to respond to that. I would hope not. And if you out there have studied my voting record on the board, you would know that I have consistently supported the members of the faculty. I have great respect for the academic community of this university, and I have supported that position, I think, consistently.
Any other comment on that question? Next question, then. The mic isn't on. Well, they can probably get it on for you.
Is it on?
Can we get the microphone on?
Is the power on?
It's on now. It's on now.
Yes, I'd like to address this to Mr. Dutton, please. About a month ago, you were quoted as saying that the University of California is a racist institution. We know that. The question is, why haven't the Regents adopted more just admissions policies, established better programs for the urban crisis? That is to say, why have they strived to maintain a racist institution?
Well, that was directed at you, Mr. Dutton.
Well, why haven't they? To me, there's no good explanation. It's merely the historical lag. I think one of the good things that's come out of the student unrest of the last 5 years is it's forcing a re-examination by the larger society, by the academicians, by the board, by many people. I don't immediately see any real hope in this area. I've found out, for example, just in the I mentioned last month when I was discussing that the University of Alabama has a larger proportion of its total student body black than the University of California now, and yet we're the greatest ones in the world to throw brickbats in that direction. I've since found that of the 4% waiver group that can come in as freshmen, if they show some potential, supposedly, and can't meet our entrance requirements, we're now letting in more athletes under that 4% than we are Mexican Americans in this state. So I think the deeper that is true. I have the figures.
I'd like to see.
I can't speak for the rest of the university, but I can speak for UCLA.
let's not turn this to whether we agree or not. We can get more questions in. I'll present them to the board, but approximately 1 out of 4 of the waiver group is now going to athletes. Now, some of them are minority groups, but I believe that the people who come in under that requirement should be on the basis of trying to correct some of the social inequalities at the university and in our society, not whether or not they can get into competitive sports.
You want to comment?
I don't think it's particularly profound to observe that there are many reasons why the university cannot just full force move in a particular new direction. You've got to change a whole range of things, including the attitudes of students and faculty and regents and public officials. And you can't go in that direction unless you've got money. Now, it's the attitude of the executive branch of state government. It's the attitude of the executive branch of the state government, I believe, that the attack upon the urban crisis ought not to come from the university, but it ought to come from the state government. The Board of Regents has taken a very clear position as to the role of the university, has requested funds, and those funds have been denied. Now, I would agree with Regent Dutton that the university has not done all that it can do and must do in this area, but it's doing the best that it can in the face of very real opposition.
I would also like to respond to Fred's comments in an affirmative way. The figure before it was 4% was 2%. In order to get it up to 4%, it had to go through the Coordinating Council for Higher Education. And I am very proud that I was on the delegation of the Coordinating Council as a representative of the University of California that pursued a vote on this a little over a year ago through 2 days of meetings and finally got it passed. This is a difficult thing to do. It isn't a push-button matter. When we talk about racism and our attitudes, this is nothing new to me. This is something I have fought for a long time. When I was a student at UCLA, the reader in political philosophy of mine was Ralph Bunche. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately on these problems, but I would suggest that you bear with the point of view of Regent Pettit that we don't have the budgets we should have, that we have asked for. We are not supported as we should be, and this is the 3rd year of it, and it's most difficult.
We realize
First question, a question here.
Can I finish? Yeah. We realize that you gentlemen are not fully representative of the full Board of Regents, so it seems necessary that on Friday, when all the regents are here, we'll have to come and confront them.
Question on the west, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask the panel as a whole how they feel they represent the students of the University of California. Do the regents represent the students? Do they represent the governor they were appointed by? Do they represent the people of California? Or do they represent the legislative bodies?
I'll take that. I think that historically they're supposed to represent the general society, the people in your words. The truth of the matter is they generally, as most people in government or in society, represent their own mixture of values and attitudes and background. This is why I think we need a broader representation on the board. But I don't think there's any simple, precise answer that can be given. So I don't think they should represent the students alone. I think it would be desirable to have a student on the board, but I think there's a terrible paternalism in saying that the board or members of the board are going to represent the students.
I should Excuse me,
Bill, go
Charles.
ahead.
I'd like to respond as to my impressions of that matter. I represent on the board the people of the state of California, and I have naturally a particular interest to the students because I was one, and of the alumni because I am one. But the governor who appointed me crossed party lines to do so, and when he appointed me, he said, "Bill, be a good regent for me and the governors to follow." And from that moment on, 1962, there was never a time that that governor sought to influence me in any way.
Question from this section, please.
As the question hasn't been asked till now, I want to ask that question on behalf of the Chancellor as well as all the students. What is the educational philosophy guiding a ruling taking back the powers of appointing his own faculty for a Chancellor? And what do the regents here feel would be the end of this path as far as the educational caliber of this state is concerned?
I have a spokesman in the audience, Mr. Regents. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's going to be any great difference of opinion here. You're talking about the taking away of the administrative authority of the chancellors. I think that all three of us spoke very strongly last month in support of the authority of the chancellors. You asked to no avail.
Any other comment? Question from this section, please. Where's the microphone?
Yes, Mr. Forbes has continually made comments in reference to the fact that the university is a part of the greater society. It would seem to be apparent from this, it's only logical to assume that being a part of larger society, students are guaranteed the rights accorded to every American citizen under the United States Constitution. Now, and yet, I believe it was September 22nd, 68, the Regents made a ruling that there was a reasonable, in quotes, there was a reasonable, should I say,
Cause.
Reasonable cause to believe.
Yeah, okay. Using your words.
That was January 22, 1969, I believe.
Okay, it's just a minute now. Okay, supposing there were a reasonable cause to assume that some student had been engaged in some, recent past, in some type of disruptive activity, that he would be placed on interim suspension before a hearing was made. Now, this would seem to me, as I say logically, in accordance with Mr. Forbes' statement that we are a part of larger society, and I wish to stress that fact, then it would appear to me that this is in violation of the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees a right of trial by jury, presuming now that the student is innocent before he is proved guilty, and yet in this case he's being placed in jeopardy before he is even brought before trial. I'd like you to comment on that, please.
Well, from a legal standpoint, I might observe that it's my understanding of the case law on the subject that the courts have held that although students generally are entitled to basic constitutional rights, they do not have all of the rights of a criminally accused. And the procedures here, for example...
When it's not a criminal punishment.
when it's really not a criminal punishment that is involved, and that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about a criminal punishment, a violation of a state or governmental statute. This is essentially a civil matter having to do with the regulation of student conduct, and that's really all we're talking about.
You are talking about a person who has already been judged now, a person who has not even been brought before trial. Supposedly you have the right, okay, to get an attorney, to be have some bail set for you or something like that, all right? Then you're out on bail pending your trial. But in this case, you are being prosecuted. Interim suspension is specifically a prosecution. This is a prosecution prior to the fact of his being judged guilty or innocent on that particular charge.
Mr. Dutton would like to respond also.
Well, the courts, frankly, are going to be the only recourse and the only source of any remedy on this. I think that if those of you, or any law school students, will see that over the course of the last decade that the courts have been moving towards finding that individuals, including students, are entitled to due process, not to be adjudged guilty and so forth like that until after they've had hearings. I don't think that we're at that point at the moment. I would predict as a lawyer that within the next half decade or so that what you think should be the law will be the law and will be so affirmed. At the same time, let me say that well, at the political, not the judicial level of our society, we're going in quite the opposite direction. What you say the Regents have done to the students, Attorney General Mitchell is now advocating being done in the larger society.
Question from this section, please.
Yes, first I would like to preface it by saying that Richard has given the Regents an opportunity to come talk with the students, and since they have for the most part failed, the students are going to come talk to the Regents on Friday. I have a series of questions dealing with Regents' procedures. You know, I would like to know how the Regents, eminently unqualified in academic affairs, presume to rule over academic affairs, how they can censor their own rules, such as the case of Sociological Analysis 139X, how they can decide on the hiring and firing of faculty. I want to know why they chose to hire a former OSS agent and a Deputy Secretary of Defense for president of this university instead of a qualified educator. I want to know why the Regents make decisions that affect the whole state in a clandestine, secretive manner. Why is there no agenda for the Friday meeting? Why are there no detailed minutes of the meetings? Why are there no open meetings? Everyone must communicate by mail.
Very difficult to know where to begin. You want to go off first, Fred?
You raised so many points, I don't think I can respond to all of them, but I'll try a few. First, I don't think that the Regents should pass on academic things. As we said at the outset of this meeting, that really should be up to the Academic Senate and the chancellors. The point, however, that we have taken back the appointment of or promotion of faculty members, which I voted against, the board has had that for 98 out of our 100 years. It was given to the chancellors, to the administration, only 2.5 years ago. I was against our taking it back, but it isn't as though that this is something suddenly new and out of the blue. But as a general rule and principle, certainly they should stay out of academic matters, and this is probably the primary, the central fight that's being fought on the board right now. And it's the fight that's being decided and is going to be decided more by the views of the entire society, of the political leadership of this state, and who they elect and who they don't elect, and who the members of the board are, who the members are who are appointed to the board. Now, let me go on. As far as the president of the university, he was what you said he was. He was also a distinguished educator. You are factually correct, but you completely ignore his experience at Oxford, his recognition in the academic community. I think that what you've done there is give only a part of the facts. Now, as far as the minutes are concerned, we don't have complete minutes. I'm one who thinks that we should have detailed ones. Shorthand is taken, there's a tape done, but we only get a summary. I think that's unfortunate, and I think it's a cause of problems. As far as open meetings are concerned, I don't think the Board of Regents should become a hearing place for every grievance. I think we should open up more communication with the students and more with the faculty. But when we get that, we're also going to get it from every outside organization, from every state legislator. We're never going to get to the business of the university itself. You open up a Pandora's box there, which I think will do more damage than good when you finally go all the way down that line.
I just have
Well,
one.
I think that the people have their redress through the election of governor and state legislature and other sources. When you talk about the people, I assume you're talking about the people of California, not just the student community.
I would have one further question, and I think this is one that's
Simplifications like that,
serious of
certainly you
us.
should have the point to vote, but what
And
does that
that
have to
is-
do in the university community? Why don't you go out and get that in larger society? There are a lot of us who are working for that, but it doesn't do any good to inject it into this discussion.
Understanding the board that you sit on, what kind of recourse is available to us? Is there
Could
any
you
valid recourse?
For what?
recourse for what?
Recourse for the, for the redress of the just demands and grievances that we have.
Let me.
Well,
Go ahead.
oh, no, well, Mr. Chairman, the question, I think, was intended to be rhetorical, but I will assume that it is not. There are clearly, in my judgment, many, many means for redress of grievance by students, faculty, administrators, and others. Through the administrative process, and I'm sure that your chancellor is much more familiar with that than I, but I know, let me take a moment to say that in my judgment, every student on this campus, every member of the faculty, every member of the university family, every member of our community is damned fortunate to have Charles E. Young as chancellor here.
I don't. Mr. Dutton wants to comment further.
I'd like to just finishing the comments I was going on. You do have many avenues of recourse, not enough, I'll say, but you do through the dean of students, through the various levels. Now, the problem has become, I think, in the last several years, there has been a student community which has seen its need for a larger role in the governance of the university to develop new channels, new positions on the board or elsewhere. I don't think that we have gone nearly as far as we should in new institutional arrangements. That's what we have to work out. Let me say to you at the same time, I'm one of those, for example, who proposed a student and an academic individual be on the board of regents and be selected by each of those communities. It was defeated. I think we will see that within the next few years. But the question, I think, is, are you people going to advocate and persist at that and do it in ways which will be effective? Much of what you do, I think, when I agree with you, is terribly counterproductive. And let's take this coming Friday. As far as you will do your own thing, and it's your business and nobody else's. But I say to you, there are some ways in which you can affect the board, the larger society, the media, and so forth. And there are a lot of ways in which you're damaging. I think that reasonable presentation, statement of grievances, silent vigils, there are many things. You've got to devise those. Let me say to this, if you think that any of us who believe in the students should have representation and new institutional arrangements in the university are going to get to first base so long as there's violence and sit-ins, you're kidding only yourself, defeating yourselves and some of the rest of us.
Question from the far west section, please.
Regent Dutton has stated that one purpose for having powerful, moneyed, and influential figures on the Board of Regents is to act as a buffer. I would like to know, given the present political situation in the governor's office, what types of resources you have and use to protect the university.
I would just like to say before Regent Dutton or others respond that is my recollection that he stated that in the historical context that was the case, and I think he made it very clear that that was what he was speaking of. But he or others may want to respond to that question additionally. Here?
All right. You gentlemen have stated that the university must take part of society, and in some places we should modify the destructive things that the university partakes in society. What about the slow death and the pollution that goes on sometimes in the classroom and sometimes not in the classroom, not having the university commit itself to solving water pollution, air pollution, oil pollution? Why are researchers having their funds cut when, is this just a matter of overall funds, or what's happening with conflict of interest as far as oil, gas, and all the other things that go into our atmosphere and affect our society? I don't think the university wants to have the Pacific Ocean or all of California's air become something like a state slum. So I'd like to find out what is the university's commitment against air pollution. Is there any overall general plan?
Well, let me, first of all, let me make a comment. Insofar as the cutting of the university's budget is concerned, the Board of Regents has certainly not been participating in budget cuts. The Regents have, over the last 3 years, requested the funds that I think were argued very soundly for on the part of the university, and have attempted to obtain those funds from the state agencies that are involved. The cutting has not been there, but members of the panel may want to make a comment about your specific policy areas you talked about.
Well, let me, Mr. Chairman, simply make an observation. Last Friday, I, with several other regents, spent the day on the Santa Barbara campus visiting with administrators, faculty members, and students there. I think very constructively. We sat down across the table, not in a formalized way like this, but as members of the university family, and we discussed the problems of the Santa Barbara campus, and it's very clear that much of the research work that is being done on the Santa Barbara campus, and to which that campus is dedicated and will continue to be dedicated, is the improvement of our environment, which is precisely what you're talking about. And it ranges from air pollution to water pollution across the board. You know the efforts here on the UCLA campus, or many of them, in this same general area.
Yes, from this section, please.
Regent Dutton's speech about counterproductivity of violence and confrontation politics becomes totally irrelevant when the absence of the majority of regents here seems to me to be more counterproductive than any violence or sit-in demonstration could be.
You want to say something?
I'll just say I disagree with you. I think it's unfortunate they didn't come, and I'm tired of hearing them say that they don't have enough of a voice and enough of a view and enough position for the conservative philosophy in the university, and then they fail to show up at a meeting like this. At the same time, the point on Friday is not to get even. The point on Friday, let's say, is to try to advance the ball, to try to get some fundamental reforms, to do some educating, I think, frankly, to appeal to the larger society, which is going to be the only recourse, the only way that this problem is going to get solved over the course of the next 10 or 15 years, or before you have kids moving into this institution.
Yes. The microphone is back just behind you there. Yes.
I wasn't sure about the answer to one question, so I may be accused of asking it again. But it's apparent to me that in a free country, people should not be forced to serve in the military. It's also apparent to me that somebody should not be denied the opportunity to serve in the military. If students, even though they are a minority, wish to partake of a program, be it in ROTC or in Black Studies, they should be allowed to. And my question is, do you feel that students should be allowed to take ROTC on this campus?
Do any of you feel that you had an opportunity a while ago that you didn't take advantage of in answering that question?
Well, I think that you should have an opportunity to take advantage of such studies and programs as meet the intellectual standards of this university. I don't think that you're entitled to get a degree or be here just for woodworking, for example. It's interesting, and this goes for both sides of the outlook here. People who are all for our ROTC, generally the very ones who say that there's no intellectual content to black studies. And the people who want black studies are the first to say they should exclude ROTC. I think there are all kinds of philosophical inconsistencies here which are not being faced up to.
Did you want to say anything?
I would add this on ROTC, that unquestionably this will be studied on the various campuses and by the statewide university on an academic level. And I will be most impressed with the recommendations of the academic community when they are presented to the board, and I would reserve my comments as to how I would vote until then. It's an open question with me. I'm a product of ROTC. I took it for 4 years here, but conditions since those days have changed materially. When I finished the university, I was not required, as young people are today, to serve in the armed forces. There's a different set of facts, different set of conditions, and we must look at all of that.
We are going to find a way to get really at student opinion across the board on this campus in regard to ROTC at the same time that we are getting the opinion of the faculty, so that this can be at least a part of the thinking of the people who ultimately have to make the final decisions. Yes. I guess we're going back over here now.
Students are very
here, fine.
First, I'd like to ask the Regents what the schedule is for Friday's meeting. I heard this was an open meeting, open to students. Could you tell me the schedule?
I think I can probably tell you, I hope I can get it right on Friday. The Regents meetings consist of a variety of meetings, really. There are some committee meetings and there is a general board meeting. The schedule for Friday, I've asked that the schedule be included in a story in the Daily Bruin tomorrow. The schedule for Thursday is a committee meeting at 11 o'clock on educational policy, which will be an open meeting.
Where is
it will be in the faculty center. There is a meeting at 2 o'clock, an open meeting of the Committee on Finance. There is no meeting this month of the third committee, which usually meets, the Committee on Grounds and Buildings. There is nothing on the agenda. On Friday morning, there is an executive session meeting of the board, and the open session is at 1:30 Friday afternoon. It also will be in the faculty center. In addition to the regents, the press, and so forth, there will be about 100 seats available for people from campus.
Well, okay, I'd like to ask my question in light of this. Chancellor Young has told us many times, we've come to him, we had a meeting in Royce Hall where Bruin estimated about 1,500 people attended, and he told us he has no power. The power is with the regents, he told us. This is true.
I think I said I had no power on one or two. I have a tremendous amount of power in some areas. There are other areas in which I have none. The specific question at which that was raised at that meeting had to do with Los Alamos and Livermore, for instance, and I indicated that this was something over which I had no control. Yes, the message was delivered.
Okay, now, from the impression I have around campus, approximately 2,000 to 3,000 students want to attend that meeting. I think we're going to have the largest turnout in that meeting that UCLA has ever seen. And as a matter of fact, at 3 o'clock in the upstairs today, the coalition is having a meeting deciding what to do about that. But But won't there be some provision so the students can hear this? I mean, we've been told use an organized way, don't use violence. But they've also told us, but what is it? Well, the Regents have no way of hearing students. I want to know, are the Regents going to hear us Friday?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I might observe that it seems to me that the conduct of a business meeting of the Board of Regents of the university is not the time or place to communicate with students. The Regents, it is my opinion that the campus visitations, which started in February with the Riverside campus and have continued on to the Irvine campus, Santa Cruz campus, and this month the Santa Barbara campus, provide a very effective means for groups of Regents to sit down and talk with students, representative students, and discuss the basic issues. This is too formalized, much too formalized, to have any kind of an effective dialogue, in my opinion, because you can't really get an exchange of ideas. Now,
let's hold the questions down, please, to one at a time.
if you want to communicate with pure force, that's one thing. If you want to communicate on the basis of what I understand the university stands for, rational persuasion, that's quite another.
Back over on this side, please.
We've been talking today about trying to kick the ROTC off campus. I want to know what's going to be done about about another problem, a problem that a lot of the students and a lot of the taxpayers are concerned with. When are we going to kick the SDS off the campuses of the University of California?
What about Ed Butler, too?
I think that's I'm going to assume for the moment that is a rhetorical question. May I move on to the next one, please?
It seems to me that all these things we've been going to are exercises in rhetoric, and I'd like to go back to a mundane point that's kind of important to me, since you keep saying everything is going to take 10 to 15 years.
We're not hearing you for some reason. I think maybe if you'd slow down a bit.
I'd like to get into a mundane point, which is kind of important to me, since everything you said is going to happen is going to take 10 to 15 years. You said that like 3 to 4% of the campus is Negro or Mexican American, saying that we're keeping out the poor. I'd like to include a little poor white Jewish person also. And what I want to say is you're talking about the campus and all these things, and yet since I started school, the fees have gone up approximately 100% in real cost with the books and everything, and you keep increasing the fees, and you keep saying we've got to do all these things and don't demonstrate, and I don't believe in demonstrating either, but yet the only things that I've ever seen that have caused any results have been sit-ins and people throwing things through buildings. People talking in rational discourse has gotten nowhere. All you've gotten is rhetoric back, and we're trying to do it. We've got these problems. It seems that when someone breaks a window and people get scared, something happens.
It seems to me that the best answer to that is right here on this campus. I think the leadership on this campus is such that it answers your question.
The leadership, all I know is on this campus, I started school.
The wrong person here. Go ahead.
If I could answer this question.
He hasn't finished his question, please.
If I could, from the leadership on this campus, I don't know what you mean by the leadership on this campus. All I know is that the fees have gone up, and people are talking about putting them up, and all I know is that switching over to the quarter system, this is something I guess for the chancellor more than anybody, I have to work 20 hours a week as well as going to school, and I have no time at all to get involved at all in the university community, and now they say that the fees are going to go up again, which is going to give me even less time. You say the leadership. I have no representation in the leadership. I have no way of getting involved in the community itself.
Well, Mr. Chancellor, I think this gets back to the political arena. We listen to him now. Just bear with me for a moment. I have fought against any increase in tuition. I am unalterably opposed to it. This is a tough thing to try to hold the line on in the face of many counterproductive demonstrations. As recently as yesterday, as he left for the East, our governor talked about talked about and his words were the millions of dollars that were millions of dollars of damage, the educational institutions, because of the last few years, were responsible for those dollars not being allocated to the educational institutions for higher education. Now, mind you, I'm for you, but we must be astute enough to stay away from being counterproductive.
I may make one response. The millions of dollars of damage that have happened in the school don't even compare to the billions of dollars being spent on arms, to the millions of dollars that were lost because of the oil slick in Santa Barbara and the problems that's going to cause. Doesn't compare to the tax relief that Reagan gives to the oil companies and other people all over the place in big business who can afford this money. And why don't we go in relativity? And you're talking about all that you're going to do. I graduate in 2 years. What are you going to do for me as a regent, as a student? I mean, like, I'm a student. I've got 4 years in this institution, and you're talking about things that are going to happen 15 years from now.
If I could, on that particular point, I'd like again to make a comment. Regent Forbes, I think, was indicating why the regents who are trying to hold down tuition and trying to get additional funds from the state are having difficulty in doing so, not indicating that he felt that the reason we were having problems, the reason we didn't have enough money was because so much property had been destroyed. We have time for one more question here, please.
Yes, specifically, there has been a great deal of talk. The people here have put on a very good show for us all this afternoon, and not a great deal has been accomplished, unfortunately. A great deal of rhetoric has been passed. Essentially, you could talk about petitioning the government, or with regard to this whole tuition thing, it is an example of taxation without representation. Essentially, the whole situation is one which is counterproductive. Now, a great deal has been said about different channels, different ways, different avenues of going about changing this institution. Unfortunately, we have seen that working through these channels usually mean that there happens to be a big dead end sign at the end of them. We have tried other channels which, for whatever reason, has brought some response, although many times this has been a very, very repressive one. Now, with regard now to getting beyond all of the rhetoric here, beyond all of the BS, exactly what do you as esteemed regents, what are you actually going to do with regard to really shaping up this whole place, with regard to having students in a real decision-making role at the university that they are a part of? There are 100,000 students in the University of California, and they don't have a damn bit of power. Now, that happens to be a bit wrong, I would think. Okay.
Well, do you want to respond to that, Fred?
Yeah, you're looking for terribly simple, quick answers and something that we can't satisfactorily respond to, and we might as well be honest about it. If you think, though, that you're going to get any more satisfactory answers at some other stage or out of any other institution, I think you don't recognize the difficulty of the job which many of you think that you want to do, but I'm afraid are not going to have the persistence and the stamina to keep at. Now, what are we going to do? I, as one, am for putting a member of the students on the Regents selected by the student community, opposing tuition, trying to see that the Regents stay out of the academic area. But what you're going to find is the majority of the Board of Regents is going to be against all of those. And you're not going to get any change until you begin to affect that outside political process. You're just stuck on that. And all your sit-ins and everything else like that isn't going to make a damn bit of difference. The truth of the matter is that the best thing that Governor Reagan has going for him are a lot of the student sit-ins and so forth. You think you've made some changes, and you have that way. But you also have built up a tremendous opposition in the outside society. Look at your public opinion polls and so forth. If you get your kicks out of the short-term results, go ahead. But if you really want to do something about what you say, if you want more student authority in this system, you're going to have to do it a lot differently than I think just the short-term letting off of steam.
Well, I want to...
As far as that goes specifically, I'd like to remark that there have been a number of students on this campus, most of the people in the coalition, in fact, who have exactly been working very hard for a long time. And unfortunately, we always hear, well, how about going and setting up committees to study the problem? Problem is studied, nothing gets accomplished. We have been working through the channels, and we have found that the channels are counterproductive, and that we feel that we must be heard at the meeting on Friday. So we shall see you there, and hopefully at the same time you shall find it in your wisdom to have a larger hall for all of the students who would like to be heard and would like to participate, who would like to actually participate in the operation of their university. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for your participation and for the way in which you handled the meeting, and I want to thank the members of the board for being here today. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to thank you, first of all, for having this forum. I know it's not an answer, but it's the beginning of an answer, and I think it's very important. And I don't care what the impression is. Thank you for this opportunity. Now, I'd like to direct the question to all of you. Being that the concept of student, quote unquote, is a white, middle, or upper class, Caucasian, Christian, Anglo-Saxon male, and being that therefore ethnic groups are left out and many of their needs are not met, and obviously almost half of its population being women, those needs are never met. Being also the fact that on the Board of Regents, the only women that are there are shadow figures, not individual thinkers, but those who clearly represent the views of status quo, establishment, and so forth. I want to know, also being the fact that there was never a chancellor in the entire UC system since its existence who was a woman, I want to know if any of you have ever thought about this sex blindness, and if ever you plan to re-examine this unethical situation, and whether you plan to implement programs to incorporate in responsible decision-making positions women on all levels of UC, not just those shadow figure women, but those that are individual thinkers who hold human values above property values and who could identify with the youth demands. And specifically to Chancellor Young, what do you plan to do about the 10 demands that Union for Women's International Liberation gave you? Thank you.
Any general comment or do you need a...
You go ahead. It was a good statement. I think in response to the material which was presented to me by the Union for Women's International Liberation, I think many of the charges had a great deal of foundation. There are there are inhibiting forces that are very deeply rooted within this university as well as within society toward the full participation of women. There are departments on this campus which, in my view, do not have a completely open approach to participation, especially at the graduate level. We are working with those departments at the present time to try to get them to change their views, to try to get them to recognize that there is a large resource here which is not being appropriately taken into account, that there is a very great need for change. There are many other aspects in the material which has been given to me about which I have much less concern and about which I tend to agree with much less fully. Now, if I can go back to what I was saying earlier, I want to thank all of you for coming, for the way in which you have addressed your questions to the board, and to thank the three members who were able to be with us today, Mr. Dutton, Mr. Pettit, and Mr. Forms, for their presence. Thank you very much.